policies that are being pursued don't even suffice to service the goals that are hypothetically trumpeted by the formulators of the policies themselves. It's a bloody miracle of stupidity and blindness.
I've given this so much thought because so many people have asked me why would they do this? It doesn't make sense. Explain it. Why would you come after the most hardworking sector, the most lucrative sector, the people that provide you with food? Why would you shut down your nuclear plants if you are to import electricity for I don't know how much more the price? Why? And I think it was Carl Jung actually who said, if you can't understand someone's actions, you have to look at the consequences and infer the motive. And that's what I've done with all of this. If the consequences of their policies are that we become poorer, we, not they, obviously, but we, if we become poorer, we become more dependent on them. We basically essentially would starve if this is put through, and we don't have the financial means anymore to import our food. And, I don't know, God forbid a disaster happens, we've outsourced everything, we could be in real trouble. Well, if those are the consequences, then apparently that's the motive. Maybe I've become too cynical, but I find it very difficult to explain it any other way, because this is not a one-time mistake. These people are the net zero scam, and I would really call it a scam. Is something
it's
that
a criminal scam.
Yes,
it's a criminal
actually,
scam.
It's
not just a scam.
It is criminal, and I think that it is of the worst type of injustice if a government and the people who are supposed to represent us, talking about democracy, liberal democracy and all, if those people turn their backs on their own population, and not just turn their backs, but actively, again, go against their interest, and allow them essentially, if things go wrong, to become poor and to starve. And I can't see, I see true evil behind these acts. I don't just see incompetence anymore.
It's worse than that, Ava. It's worse than that even, because I was speaking with someone the other day, one of my podcast guests, who said that their sampling has indicated that young people now think about climate apocalypse 3 or 4 times a day. Right? They're literally obsessed by it. And we know perfectly well that demoralizing insistence that all human striving is planet-destroying, patriarchal ambition and has to be brought to a halt. Not only does it risk economic catastrophe, really right down to the fundamental level in the way that we've been describing, but it's also demoralized an entire generation of people and made them afraid, terrified, like Chicken Little, that the sky is falling, even when the IPCC itself, who are hypothetically the people that, are on top of the appropriate data, have indicated nowhere in their documentation that we're facing anything approximating a true emergency. And so that does beg the question, as you said, just exactly what the hell's going on. And I think that your method of inferring the motivation is actually the case. I think the proximal cause is the fact that, just as in Nazi Germany, let's say, that any old mid-level bureaucrat could ratchet himself up the hierarchy by identifying, at least in principle, with the overarching Nazi ideology. It's absolutely the case with these bureaucrats who bear no immediate economic consequences for the idiocy of their actions. If they put forward this green agenda and they're celebrated by their idiot peers for doing so, that's definitely good in the immediate present for their career development and their self-aggrandizing moral proclamations of virtuous self. And in the aggregate, we get exactly this sort of thing. Anthony, what consequences do you think that these protests are going to have had? Let's start with that. What consequences have they had? And what do you think is going to unfold? Because this is a relatively new government in Germany, and it isn't obvious to me that it's going to fall apart in consequence as the government in the Netherlands did. Certainly the Canadian government sailed right through the trucker protest as if it never even happened, and the probability that Justin Trudeau is going to rule with his velvet fist for the next year appears to be extremely high. So what do you think is going to happen in Germany as a consequence of these protests?
Well, it's very hard to predict. The government didn't learn its lesson yet. That's obvious. We had our finance minister on stage today, and it was obvious he didn't learn anything about our actions we did. But what we already achieved is that we are, like I said in the beginning, so united. Like I honestly never thought we could be. If I said that, I mean, I would say 80%, and this is an official poll of our mainstream media. 80% says they are behind our actions, behind our. Well, it's not a strike; it's a protest, and that's amazing. That's honestly amazing, especially getting in front of this agenda, what we were talking about. And then, like I said, people are realizing that now, and they're realizing it for one reason. They believed everything, or most of them believed all this agenda. We have to save CO2 to save our lives and all that nonsense. But now it's costing them money. Everybody's paying for this, and we are paying a big price. And we didn't talk about even. I mean, with the war in Ukraine. Obviously, Ukraine produces a hell of a lot of wheat and crop for the poorest in the world. And if you look into where the wheat, if it gets out of the Black Sea region, goes to, it mainly goes to European countries, Turkey and China. It doesn't really go to Africa where it should go, and it comes to us. Poland, Hungary, they said we don't want it. They shut their borders, so it's coming straight through to Germany. And the Danish government only recently checked if it's contaminated with chemicals which are not allowed in the European Union, and they said yes, it is. It's official, but nobody cares. So we are not getting the price we should get for our crop, our grains, and we are getting overflown by grain from the Ukraine, which is
bad,
which is really bad. I mean, obviously it's bad. You know, first of all, poor countries aren't getting it. We can't get rid of ours, and the government's even paying some parts of the transport to Germany. So they are obviously using our tax money to make sure we get a bad price for our crop.
Well, I think we were already talking about how demoralizing this agenda is. And food, of course, if you want to demoralize a people, I mean, it's done by feeding them bad food as well. I mean, Jordan, you know, I don't have to tell you about this, but the importance of good meat, of healthy animal fats, it's huge. And if you make people feel like the only thing that they deserve is, you know, bad
Bugs.
wheat or bugs, insects, or
5%.
synthetic meats, you know, feed literally food that will make you weak. I think that says something about our establishment. You know, it says something about the way that we are governed. It says something about the way that we are ruled.
For any given bureaucrat to proclaim his or her alliance with the planet, with Blessed Mother Nature, to virtue signal in the direction of a green agenda, and to thereby ratchet him or herself not only up the moral hierarchy and pat themselves on the back, but also to use that as a means of advancing their career, even in micro steps. And then you can imagine that the aggregate consequence of that across the entire bureaucratic class, able to use this agenda as a get out of jail free card, as an excuse and explanation for every failure. We're only pursuing degrowth because of the green agenda. You can imagine that all of that collective activity going on in the background acts in a quasi-conspiratorial manner to push this agenda forward. And then
In this thought-provoking discussion, Jordan Peterson examines the weaponization of labels in contemporary politics, focusing on the term far-right and its impact on populist movements. Peterson discusses the ease with which bureaucrats co-opt environmental agendas for personal gain, creating a quasi-conspiratorial atmosphere. The conversation delves into the repercussions of the so-called C40 consortium agenda, revealing extreme proposals such as limiting citizens to 3 articles of clothing per year and a 95% reduction in private car ownership. Peterson explores how these ambitious plans can adversely affect working-class citizens, prompting a spirited defense from those on the front lines, such as the farmers. Peterson provides insight into the recent farmers' protests in the Netherlands, emphasizing the shift in political dynamics and increased resistance to mainstream media tactics. The discussion explores the dangers of overusing labels like far-right and the need to confront them head-on to protect genuine discourse.
And then, just so that we don't assume that I'm only thinking about quasi-conspiracies, I've looked very carefully at the so-called C40 consortium agenda. And this is a consortium of some of the 40 largest cities on the globe, all allied together at the level of local municipal government, who are literally pursuing an agenda that includes no more than 3 articles of clothing per citizen per year, a 95% in private car ownership, which is why we're all being encouraged to produce the electric cars that we won't have enough electricity to run anyways, because you don't need electricity if you actually don't get to own a car. And if the goal is a 95% reduction in private automobile ownership, then it doesn't matter if there's no damn grid. 1 short haul flight per person every 3 years, which will completely, obviously, decimate the entire travel industry, plus all of the tourism industry that Europe depends on absolutely in all possible manners. And then overall, although this isn't directly from the C40, the fundamental goal of something approximating an 85% reduction in Western living standards, which is the calculation of the green virtuous globalist utopians as to what's necessary in order for us to inhabit a green planet. And so all of this means, to me, it means not only are the bureaucrats who are using this get out of jail free card to advance their careers, and the conspiratorialists who are radically left using it explicitly as an agenda, it also means that the bloody radical leftists are 100% willing to sacrifice the working class and the poor to their ambition and their green agenda. Now that has backfired in the Netherlands.
What I think we can see, or what happened in the Netherlands, was we had the last major farmers' protests in March, right? And then right in March, at the end of March, we had general elections in which the farmer citizens movement, a relatively new party, got a landslide victory. And then about a month ago, we had general elections for our parliament, in which the PVV, which was originally branded as the far right, again, we can fill a bingo card with this, the far right party won a staggering number of seats, for Dutch standards at least. People have to understand we have a system in which there are multi-parties. We don't have a 2-party system, we have plenty, and they always have to form a coalition. But this party, the PVV, the far right party, won about 1/4 of all votes. And now in the polls, they're even looking at 1/3 because they're only rising in popularity. And I really think that this farmers' protest, and that's why I think it's so important what you guys are doing here in Germany, and that's why I wanted to be there, is that the farmers are in the vanguard of this political change. It's you guys, because anybody with a functioning set of eyes and brain cells, we talk to you, we go out in the streets, and if you actually see the people that go out there, you see that those are not extremists. Those are normal people. And so if you come after those, if you come after the people who provide you with food, that's something that I think most ordinary people can't really comprehend. It's like, why would you come after the people who provide us with food? That doesn't make any sense, you know, and they don't stand for that. So I think that the farmers' uprising in the Netherlands has had a great impact on our elections. So much so now that, yeah, the far right, quote unquote, has won. And obviously we're not out of the woods yet because we still have to form a coalition, but it is a major political shift where I feel like really something in the hearts and minds of the people has changed, where they're no longer afraid of the usual intimidation tactics of the mainstream media and the establishment. They're, you know, they, like we said, they have nothing to lose anymore.
Do you think, Eva, do you think there's a danger? What might be the danger, if any, of normalization of the so-called far-right agenda? I mean, there's two ways of looking at this, right? Because one way is looking at it the way you guys have been looking at it, which is that the terminology of far-right itself has been weaponized, and now that weapon is losing its potency, because your claim fundamentally is that it's been applied to the obvious, what would you say, to those who are obviously at the bedrock of society, and that would be certainly the truckers and the farmers, like self-evidently. And if truckers and farmers just going about their business have become far right, then the terminology itself loses its meaning. But then you could also say, well, there has been danger in the past presented by the far right, and the fact that the term no longer has any validity as a weapon also means in principle that people who have a genuinely far right agenda, such as they are, can now use this populist movement to their own advantage to put forward their hypothetically nefarious agenda. And so I'm wondering, Eva, how you've worked through those complexities in your own mind, what you think far right means now, and if you see any dangers in this populist uprising, let's say, and the transformation of the political scene that's emerged in consequence.
Well, there are a few things to say to that. I think indeed the one danger that I could imagine is that because this term is so overused and has become so trivialized in that sense, it's like, okay, if there is a far-right subgroup that wants to do all sorts of evil things, then maybe we wouldn't take it as seriously anymore because it's so overused on ordinary people with valid, totally justified opinions. I don't see them though. I don't see them out on the streets. I don't meet them. So what I have personally done in my own life, I've had my fair share of slander, and the Dutch mainstream media, when I started out in my political career, called me the shield maiden of the far right. Well, I was 23 when that happened to me, and I was terrified because I thought to myself, well, okay, I can forget a normal life. I can forget ever having a job. Like Google never forgets. So if somebody Googles you and the first thing they see about you is shield maiden of the far right, well, that's not good. But I've now come to the conclusion that, there is no point in being afraid of a label that doesn't actually apply to you. So I just kind of run with it now. It's in my bio on X because I think it's funny, and I want to show to other people, don't be intimidated by people who use that label to silence you. Because nowadays, to me, or what I find, is that they put far right on just about anybody who is somewhat right-wing to the center, who has conservative views, maybe doesn't, cut their hair short and dye it purple and scream, destroy the patriarchy, people who oppose mass immigration, which clearly doesn't have the best effect on, or didn't have the best effect on Europe. And so if you have those, I would say, completely legitimate, valid opinions, you earn that title nowadays with the mainstream media. So the best thing you can do is stop caring. Because if you stop being afraid of it, then they lose their power over you, and we can demand actual change, which nowadays would be labeled as far right, but 30 years ago would be just a Christian democratic ideal.